Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, where on this show, I want you to think about technology and how it can make a difference. And also, maybe, just maybe, see the world in a slightly different light. For example, everyone listening in Western Europe and the US right now, many of people will be getting excited about the holiday season and picking up the latest smartphone for over $1,000. But for billions of people all over the world, they're still off the grid with no access to a bank account and no access to a smartphone. So the next time you're complaining about the cost of your smartphone contract, spare a thought for those earning $10 a day and where a smartphone could quite easily cost half of their monthly income. But a company called PayJoy is helping to change all that, and they're working with Samsung to bring phones all over the world to those who can't afford it or don't have credit. It's a fantastic story, and I want to hear about the big difference that they've been making in Latin America, India, and in Africa, and indeed all over the world. So buckle up, hold on tight, so I can beam your ears all the way to the Bay Area so we can speak with Mark Heynen from PayJoy. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Mark Heynen. I'm Chief Business Officer and co-founder of PayJoy. I mainly lead international growth and partnerships for PayJoy.
So for anyone listening that's just learning about PayJoy for the very first time, can you tell me what PayJoy is, who your customers are, and also what kind of problems you're solving?
Sure. PayJoy is really solving two fundamental problems. One problem we're solving is an affordability problem when it comes to smartphones. The average selling price of a smartphone has been going up, and it's getting to the point where a lot of people in emerging markets simply will not be able to afford the smartphones that are being marketed to them. The second problem we're solving is a credit problem. The reason why people in emerging markets can't afford these smartphones is because they don't qualify for monthly payment plans, the same monthly payment plans that you or I or most people in Western Europe and the developed world have a lot of experience with and take for granted, frankly, when it comes to buying smartphones. And so we really want to enable those monthly payment plans for the next billion, for the next wave of people in emerging markets who definitely want a smartphone. They're quite aware of the fact that smartphones exist. They may even have bought the $100 smartphone that's been marketed to them, and most people in that world are not happy with it. I've spent a lot of time working on emerging market smartphones, and we know very well that people are generally eager to upgrade their phone. And so we really allow those people to purchase a modern smartphone using monthly payment plans by approving the vast majority of people for monthly payment plans and using our proprietary locking technology to collateralize the phone and using unique proprietary underwriting tools to underwrite people who don't have the typical credit scores that folks are used to. And so between that mobile underwriting and the lock, we feel we can enable folks worldwide to get on monthly payment plans. And internationally, we work with partners to effectively roll out those payment plans in their markets.
I also learned recently that you launched fairly early in Latin America. Can you tell me a little bit about that and your experiences there?
Absolutely. We initially launched in the US, and it became quite clear that the product market fit in emerging markets is likely going to be very strong just because we were getting strong demand from the underbanked in the US. And so very early on in our history, actually before we even raised our Series A financing, we actually expanded into Mexico and started working with Telcel distributors in Mexico, providing monthly payment plans in those Telcel distributors. And word really spread like wildfire among these Telcel distributors. There are a fairly small number of them, and they all talk to each other. And they have not been used to seeing affordable monthly payment plans, especially ones where over 80% of people get approved. In the Mexico, we were basically just requiring government ID, Facebook account, and a phone number to qualify. And over 80% of people were getting approved. And that got these folks really interested and excited. And we then expanded across Mexico through them and also Telcel's competitors, Telefonica and AT&T, heard about this and got on board very quickly. And I think what's exciting about that is that it grew very quickly. And also we learned that this is a product that really works for emerging markets. And we also, learned a lot about how to scale our company in a way that meets the fairly high demand that we're seeing. And so now we're live in Panama and Guatemala and a few other places as well.
Fantastic. Well, you guys first appeared on my radar recently when I saw that PayJoy recently launched a groundbreaking service in India with a partnership with Samsung, which was co-branded as Samsung Sure. Can you tell me more about that partnership and what it meant for listeners that have not seen that?
Sure. I think what everyone's probably quite aware of is that, India is a massive country, and most of the people in India, do not have access to modern financial solutions. I think there's been a recent push with demonetization to get more people onto the financial grid via bank accounts, but it still remains a largely underbanked country. And so what we've done with Samsung specifically is roll out a program to enable people walking into a store to quickly get approved on monthly payment plans without requiring necessarily having access to a credit card or any of the typical things people would need to qualify normally for monthly payment plans. And that's really important for consumers so they can actually afford a modern smartphone, but also for Samsung as they're trying to innovate really on the middle to high end in terms of creating flagship products and getting those flagship products into the hands of consumers and making them affordable for consumers is really important for Samsung as well. It's also very important for everyone else in the mobile ecosystem in India, including the carriers and, of course, the people that provide applications in India that need people to have modern smartphones.
And we're also now entering an era of the $1,000 smartphone. And I think it's crucial to understand that 3/4 of citizens in India earn less than $10 a day. And a smartphone could easily cost half of their monthly income. So can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind PayJoy and also why you set out to solve this problem?
Sure. PayJoy really originated from the understanding that most of the emerging markets, most of the developing world really prefers pay-as-you-go as a way to get access to things. Me and my co-founder first met at Google. My co-founder then left Google to really invent pay-as-you-go solar, to transform a $200 solar kit into a $1 a day solar kit. And that was really the genesis of PayJoy, to do that for smartphones. I think our understanding was the smartphone prices were not going down, they were actually going up. And, it's something that a lot of people don't realize. The average selling price of a smartphone globally has continued to rise. And, I think that's really where there's a big gap. People here in the US and in Europe are quite used to paying monthly for smartphones, and so don't see this as a problem. Meanwhile, as you point out, many people have to spend a month's of income or more just to buy a smartphone, which is quite critical for a lot of people in terms of their daily life. And also, I think, quite critical, in terms of people improving their lives and getting access to opportunity. A lot of modern opportunities require a smartphone, whether you're an Uber driver or whether you're using WhatsApp just to communicate with people for business. And so that's really where we see a really big opportunity in India, where there's a large population really at the middle and base of the pyramid, who we think, with our luck, where we can collateralize the phone, would actually be able to pay monthly on a pay-as-you-go basis for a phone.
Now, there is a lot of talk about that we're entering a mobile-first world, or we're already right in the middle of a mobile-first world. But what I find really interesting is how some parts of the world have completely skipped the PC generation and entered the market as mobile-first. So do you think, or should I say, what kind of impact do you think that rising number of users from developing countries is going to have on the global business landscape? Because it feels like there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. There really is. People often forget that there are literally billions of folks who are not on the grid right now. A lot of people talk about China, how China has, been able to increase their standard of living and reduce poverty rates. But I think there's opportunity globally for many of these people to really get on the grid and start contributing economically to their own livelihood and to really increase their standard of living. And so I think that's the smartphone is this amazing innovation that first of all has universal demand. Everyone wants a smartphone. Second of all, it is, you're able to make it into collateral using our locking technology. And so it can actually enable someone to get finance because they can collateralize the phone. And third of all, it's obviously a mechanism, a communication mechanism, a data communication mechanism. And that allows us to do a lot of work on mobile underwriting to ensure we continue to provide financial services to this customer base without having them go to a bank or do things that they're not quite comfortable doing or haven't been doing in the past. So I think the smartphone presents this really unique opportunity. It's probably a window of time over the next 3 years where you have billions of people who don't have access to a modern smartphone yet. And we think that's actually an opportunity, first of all, for them to really get on the grid, both digitally and financially, but also an opportunity really for the whole mobile and financial ecosystem to actually start serving folks that they haven't been used to serving. I think it's a existential problem for a lot of the OEMs who have been making more and more expensive smartphones and realizing that these smartphones are really targeted at their existing customers and ignoring new customers. Fundamentally, these OEMs and a lot of people out there need to start thinking of the next wave of customers, the next billion who are going to get on the grid.
Absolutely. And something else that I find incredibly exciting is how you guys are helping the unbanked in Africa and helping them afford a smartphone and access finance directly. It's something which they've not had access to before. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because, again, it's a fantastic thing, isn't it?
Sure. We started in the U.S. And in Mexico by approving over 80% of people for monthly payment plans with, really only identity verification, very basic underwriting. And we realized that this is actually something that can be done globally. And at that point, we decided to basically provide our software to anyone out there who wants to use it to approve people for monthly payment plans and to basically, sell more smartphones and originate finance contracts, lending contracts effectively. And what we did in Africa is interesting. We actually teamed up with a large regional distributor called Allied. We also teamed up with, a regional finance company called Unity Finance. And neither had really done monthly payment plans on smartphones before in, some of their target markets like Zambia. It's really not something, credit is not quite common. In-store credit is not common either. So this was brand new to them. And we really just let them use our software to go ahead and do this, to originate those contracts and to allow people to pay monthly. And once we did that, we saw a lot of excitement. We also saw that we could scale this in other places as well. So we partnered with D-Lite on launching in Kenya to sell phones to people who are using their pay-as-you-go solar kits, are launching with Baobab in Senegal to allow them to sell phones to people who are using their technology and who are effectively buying solar kits and other things from Baobab. And so we see a lot of potential for people who are already in these countries and already selling tools and technology to people who don't have credit to really use our software to get their customers more phones. And we think that's interesting.
So what's your grand vision for PayJoy? And is there anything else you can share with us about the future and what you're planning there?
Sure. We really see the fundamental problem that we're solving to be the credit problem. Most of the people in emerging markets do not have access to credit. Most of new phone sales in the next 5 years will be in emerging markets. And we see a big opportunity to use the phone as a way to get people access to credit. And, in the next 3 to 5 years, we see a lot of potential to really be the gateway for people to get on the grid, both financially and digitally. We see a real possibility that we can have 1 billion customers just considering our potential reach. And so our focus has been on getting as many OEMs on board to be compatible with PayJoy, to get as many distribution partners on board to use our platform to sell phones. and then also to get as many finance companies, finance partners internationally on board to originate contracts on our platform.
So for anyone listening that'd like to find out a little bit more information, or maybe even reach a member of your team if they've got any questions after listening to our conversation, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I would encourage people who are interested to go to payjoy.com. You can also read more about our story on blog.payjoy.com. We announce a lot of our new product developments and launches there. And, for anyone who's listening in the US or Mexico, you're welcome to put your information to PayJoy and try to, basically see what it's like to go into a store. And I'd be happy to hear from anyone who wants to connect to me on LinkedIn if they see any opportunities.
Well, I'll add those links to the show notes just so people can reach you nice and easily. And like I said at the beginning of the show, we are living in the age of the $1,000 smartphone. And I think we often take for granted that what we do have access to, whereas many areas of the global community don't have access to that. And I always say at the end of every episode is that technology works best when it brings people together. And it seems to me that PayJoy are bringing smartphone technology to customers who otherwise couldn't afford it and actually getting the global community on the grid, which is a fantastic thing. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing your story today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
One of the most important aspects of technology and the change that it brings is that everyone comes along for the ride. And I mean the whole world. So I love how PayJoy are united in their desire to bring a product that really matters, making technology accessible to people who otherwise would be left behind. I also love the fact that many regions in the developing world have skipped PCs and laptops and are heading straight into the mobile world and don't have all those legacy problems to worry about. So for these reasons alone, I think the balance might be restored a little when billions of people come online who are perfectly equipped for that mobile-first world. But there is still so much work to do. Remember that much of the world is still unbanked and many people don't even have access to a smartphone. But technology and a combination of new ways of doing things and new solutions and new projects is slowly changing things. And that makes me a little happier and also hopeful that tech will deliver meaningful change to the world. But I am the eternal optimist. I want to pass the mic over to you now. What are your thoughts? What are your insights? And what are your experiences? And we do have listeners in 165 countries listening to this conversation now. So I would love to hear what you think of the PayJoy solution and indeed everything we've talked about today. And you can do that by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweeting me at Neil C. Hughes, or of course pop by my website techblogwriter.co.uk/podcast, and you can even leave me a virtual voicemail. But it's time for me to go now, I'm afraid. I return tomorrow with another guest, but until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.